here is my presentation then. So, welcome everyone. So today we're going to talk about how slowing down boosts your impact. It's very counterintuitive, of course, in these fast times and makes you feel happy. So my name is Murielle and I'm based in Brussels. I have two teenage boys, Max and Luca. I created my own company, Key Leader, where we help leaders build meaningful lives and organizations, really the middle ground between having an impact, a balance, and meaning. I'm also an academic director at Solvay Brussels School, where I'm responsible for two programs. And I give keynotes, workshops. I have a podcast, Rebel Leader with a Heart. If you want to listen to it, it's completely free. And I do that while working less than 30 hours per week and being a part-time digital nomad. So I love to travel. This was me in Costa Rica, for instance. But I just came back from Africa. And I also like to party. So that having fun for me is very, very important. So having an impact, having meaningful connections and meaningful work, but also having fun. And I used to be the CEO of Plantain, where I transformed the organization. And so today I'm going to talk about why do we work so hard and run all the time? What are the external and internal factors that leads to that? And also the impact, how we can slow down and reach even better results and why slowing down works. What are the barriers to your transformation? What is preventing you from reaching these results as well? And how you can start. And then, of course, I'll answer your questions. So first, I wanted to start with a story I've lived. So I want to describe one of the most emotional and intensive moments that I've lived. I was sitting at home at my dining table and I had to make a very important call. And I felt horrible. My whole body was shaking. I felt as if something was compressing my chest. I I couldn't breathe properly. My throat was very tight. Tears started running down over my face while I couldn't control them. I only noticed the tears because it started to be wet. And it was like something inside my body was taking over. I felt like running away. I wanted to escape what I was feeling. I wanted to resign. I felt completely worthless and scared even. And my body was reacting as if I was in a life-threatening situation. And so you might wonder what exactly had happened for me to find myself in this completely stressed, overstressed, and scared situation. You'll probably think something horrible happened to me. And the voice in my head was making things worse. You're worthless. You have to, why did you let this happen? You're a disappointment. What are people going to think of you? But I had to make this call that I was dreading because I was going to let someone down big time. And so, did somebody die? Were my children in an accident? Was I going to lose my house or my money? And before I tell you what's happened that's put me in that state and that horrible state and very intensive emotional state, I first want to give you the reasons why so many of you are so busy, why the workload is so high, why we are so busy despite automation, artificial intelligence, and our technological advances. So I'm going to share this. And then a little bit later, I'm going to share what had happened to put me in this horrible situation. So the first thing I want to share is the years it took for different technologies to hit 25% of the US population. And here you see it in years. It took 30 years for the telephone, radio a little bit less, television a little bit less, and internet, I think it was 8 years. And here you see now the new technologies, the latest technologies, where it took 78 months for Google Translates, 55 months for Spotify, only 2 months for ChatGPT to reach 100 million users. So what this graph is showing us is that the speed of change has accelerated. And it has accelerated at a pace that we have never witnessed before. But unfortunately, most of our habits and of our business techniques were invented in slow times. And today we are in very fast times. And let me first describe to you what the difference is between these slow times and the fast times. So in slow times, of course, the speed of change was lower. The tasks were more delimited, we had less requests, we had a more limited work time, and many jobs were pretty simple. In fast times, we have a high speed of change, we have less delimited tasks than before. If you, for instance, worked on a brochure, you know when it started and when it finished. Now we have a website instead of a brochure, and the website is never finished. You can always improve it, and this is happening with a lot of tasks we have to deliver. They are less delimited. Then we get requests from many more channels than before. Not only email, meetings, but also WhatsApp, chat, Messenger, LinkedIn Messenger, from strangers, from colleagues. So we are bombarded with requests. Also, we can work 24/7 if we want. And we have seen now, especially after the pandemic, that we have lost a lot of structure. So the boundary between work time and personal time has really blurred. And some people have never worked this much. And then our job have become much more complex because everything is interconnected. So if you want to do something, you have to align with way more people than you used to. And your job is not as simple anymore. It has really increased in complexity. And so what is the impact of those fast times? Well, the fact that we have so much change and so many new opportunities, so many new technologies, customer demands, regulations, is leading to a boost in opportunities and threats. Then the work that is less delimited creates, of course, way more tasks for you as well. You have to decide when you stop. We get way more requests than before. We have this 24/7 connection, so we can work in principle 24/7 as well. And our job have become more complex. And all that leads to an explosion of workload. According to me and what I see now in the customers that I help, it has simply become impossible to deliver everything that comes in on your plate. On one side, the workload has exploded in the last years and it has been intensified since COVID. On the other side, you have been conditioned, like Pavlov has conditioned his dogs. So Pavlov was a psychologist in the early 20th century that did some tests with dogs. And he really conditioned his dogs, and he noticed that certain behaviors were not simply present in you, but you could create certain behaviors and certain reactions. And the thing is that you have been conditioned as well. From a very young age in school, you have been conditioned to deliver every request, to learn to only relax when work was finished, to control everything, and to not make any mistakes and being perfect. That was the way to good grades. And when you did that, you were worthy. You were a good student. And this has been also, the conditioning has continued when you started your career as well. So you're worthy when you do all these things. Then, of course, on the other hand, if you don't deliver every request, if you relax while you still have a lot of homework to do, if you're not in control and you make mistakes, then you're worthless. And this conditioning has been really there for years and years and years, way more than Pavlov has conditioned his dogs. And so this conditioning is so present that most of you have unconsciously linked your core identity to delivering, to working hard, to being perfect, to control everything. And that's why when you don't deliver everything, when you want to say no to somebody, when you make a mistake, when you pause while your to-do list is still very long, well, that's why you can then feel guilty, or you feel like maybe others will think I can't handle things, or I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough. So this is really a conditioning that is deep inside most of you, especially the good students. And so when I go back to my story where I was feeling like chest was compressed, I was crying, my whole body was shaking, what was happening to me? Well, in fact, at that time, I was the managing director of Plantain. And for the first time in my career, I had to call my boss to tell him that we had missed our budget. We were supposed to grow in revenues, but I just found out that we missed 2 million euro revenues. And I didn't know yet why that happened, how I was going to fix it. So we were still extremely profitable, but I had failed in reaching very ambitious goals that year. And I was going to disappoint him. And other thoughts crossed my mind. A lot of people think I'm successful, but if they knew I'm a fraud, I'm a big failure. And so my body reaction was completely unrational, of course. It was like my life was threatened. But I was healthy, my friends and family were doing okay, I was making a lot of money, I was successful, people trusted me, but my body was reacting disproportionately to the situation I was experiencing. And that was only because of my very strong conditioning. And my conditioning was unfortunately also enhanced by a difficult childhood I've had. And so I really had to learn to recondition myself if I wanted to continue being successful in these crazy times. So what's happening, and this is happening worldwide, unfortunately, is that most people find themselves in a catch-22. On one hand, we have this explosion of workload that has become impossible to deliver. And on the other hand, you feel worse if you don't deliver everything, or if you pause while your work isn't finished. So this is really a catch-22. And how do most people react then? It's usually by working harder or by running faster. And so that is the biggest reason why so many of you have never run this fast and are working this hard. Because on the one hand, the fast times have made it impossible to deliver everything. And on the other hand, you have been conditioned to deliver everything, and otherwise you don't feel great. So yeah, I just did the poll. And so what is the impact of this? And what we see, first of all, is that your impact starts to decrease, because if you continue running and running and running and not stop to think about a creative solution, to analyze things, to improve your relationships with your team or your colleagues, well, that's when your impact decreases. You start losing your motivation. You can compensate by drinking, gaming, social media, buying stuff. That's probably mostly women. Binge watching series. You can exhaust yourself. A lot of people tell me I'm not present enough for the people I care about, and present enough sometimes physically, sometimes mentally. You're there, but you're not really there for your children or your loved ones. You try to continue delivering by numbing yourself, trying not to feel so that you can continue. You spend a lot of time in meetings because you just let things happening to you instead of taking charge of your life and your time. You don't take care of yourself enough. That's what happened to me as well. I started to sleep less, to exercise less, to not eat as healthily anymore. And another thing that's happening, especially when you numb yourself, when you stop allowing yourself to feel, is that you start to overthink things. And to overthink things sometimes till a point where your thoughts, very unproductive thoughts, can take over your life. And you'd like to have a holiday from your own thoughts. And that's not productive. And this had happened to me as well when I was a managing director of that organization. And that's when I had this intuition that I had to go out of my head. So this is what happens to you, but now let's look at the statistics worldwide. So what is happening is that 44% of workers are in psychological distress. Burnouts have doubled between 2020 and 2021. 19% of sick leaves are linked to psychological causes. And 44% of the people feel stressed because of their workload. So when we look at the worldwide statistics, it's really, really bad. And it's not great, of course, but I often say the fact that you are feeling that bad, the fact that so many people feel bad, it has also a role, because this suffering allows you to give the energy to transform yourself. And I believe we have come at the end of a model, and that's why the statistics are so bad. You can't continue working like this. Organizations are currently making people sick, especially the young people. And so I'm also here to tell you that there is another way. And let's go into that way. So, what can you do to still have an impact while not having the hard work and the exhaustion? And for that, I'm going to go back to my story a little bit when I became a managing director, because the principles that I'm going to share with you now come from my own experience as a managing director. And in the meantime, in the last 7 years, I've accompanied over 1,000 leaders and their teams in their transformation. And so when I became a managing director, my organization was decreasing in revenues and in profit. I had private equity shareholders that wanted to sell the company. It was their time now to sell. And so they didn't want to invest. They wanted to increase the short-term profit immediately. Well, we were decreasing in revenues and in profit. And we were at the beginning of a market disruption. We had to digitalize our organization. And people in my organization were working way too much, were already with a very high workload, probably like you are. So I was there, I was thinking, how am I going to fix this problem? How am I going to increase profit, to reinvent and digitalize the organization while people have already such a high workload? And I didn't want to restructure because that wasn't aligned with my values. And the only way I could do that was by focusing. And by focusing, I mean extreme focus. So I decided to stop 70% of the brands and projects we were currently working on. And focus is really what sets successful leaders apart from less successful leaders. But focus means saying no to things. And before I could focus, I had to know what my intention was. So I had to know what I wanted to reach, because otherwise, how could I know what to say yes to and what to say no to? So I needed to focus, but first I needed to know, okay, what do I want to reach? And how was I feeling at the time? And probably you're feeling the same way. On one hand, I had my shareholders telling me you have to save costs, reduce FTEs, accelerate growth, and we need the profit now. And on the other hand, I had the people in my organization, and if you're a manager, a middle manager, or even an employee, you might feel the same. We need to invest more, we need to hire people, we need realistic growth, and we need more time. And there in the back also, I had my children. They wanted me to play with them. So to know what I wanted, I had to take into account what I wanted for the organization, for my career, but also for my private life. So I wanted to improve education. I wanted to increase profit, but I wanted to do that while still being able to be there for my children. And to improve education and to have this new strategy, we had to come up with new business models, new ecosystems. But once I knew what I wanted, that's when I could start focusing and saying no to things. So focusing is about saying no to a lot of things. But that's when the shit starts to happen, because when I decided to stop 70% of the projects, the brands, people were not happy about it. For some people, these were their baby projects. They had worked for a long time on these projects. Customers were unhappy. I was in educational publishing. I had authors who were unhappy. So I disappointed a lot of people, and it created a lot of chaos. And that's, of course, when my conditioning kicked in. So my conditioning of delivering everything, not disappointing, being in control. And so my conditioning was sometimes preventing me from actually saying no and really focusing. And that's when I noticed that I could only reprogram myself and recondition myself when I had energy. So when I was feeling good, I could go out of my comfort zone, accept the bad sensations of saying no and the guilt and the not feeling good enough, and do what was necessary to be successful. And so managing my energy became a very, very important job for me. Then the other thing that was important is my mindset. I had to be conscious. I had to be aware that I was about to say yes to somebody, because you're often not aware of that. Somebody asks you something, is very disappointed, doesn't want his project to be killed. You feel guilty, you feel really bad. And if you're not aware of all these feelings, you end up saying yes to that person, while you know that for having an impact for your organization and a work-life balance, you should say no. And so I had to learn to be aware and manage my thoughts, manage my sensations, notice what were my thoughts telling me, notice what were my emotions, what were my sensations. And by noticing and being aware of those, that's when you free yourself. That's when you are at choice. Because if I wasn't aware, I wasn't at choice, and I was doing my conditioning. And the conditioning that you all have probably, and I still have a little bit, is to deliver everything, to try to control everything, to never stop. And it doesn't work anymore in fast times. It's impossible. And to do that, I had to also learn something else. And to illustrate that something else, I'm going to share a little video with you.
Success in life is all about speed. It's about how fast you can adapt to change.
Missing so many things can happen. It's really, you can't actually recall things. You're like gone. in this kind of flow. Just trying to don't do any mistake. When you're on the car,
Don't let the pressure get too big. You get into the car, you are set up to succeed. I think the real irony of speed is, in order to go fast, you need to slow your mind down. Slow down when the pressure is about to rule your mind. Slow down when every hundredth of a second is starting to count. Take a deep breath. Just listen to yourself. Because a calm mind is the unbeatable weapon to master any challenge. Don't let others try to bring you down. Self-control is strength, but calmness is the cradle of power. And when you finally reach the point where everything around you slows down, speed up. This is what racing has taught me.
So I had to learn to slow down and pause regularly. Slow down and pause so that I could manage my mindset, so that I could be creative, so that I could increase my energy, think about what I truly wanted, and focus. And if you keep running and running and running, you don't get to, you start working very hard for too little impact. And it's not working anymore in digital times. Okay, let's go then back to what are the things then that you need and why do you need to slow down? So when I did that, when I learned to focus, but to focus, I had to be intentional. To be able to say no, I had to be able to free myself from my conditioning and manage my energy. I had to be aware of those conditionings, of how my body was reacting, how my thoughts were, my emotions, and I had to slow down regularly. And that's how I got into what I call effortless work. And I like this little picture of the people trying to move something with squared wheels and somebody who's coming with a solution, but people are saying, no, thank you, we're too busy to listen to that. Yeah. Ah, you don't see the screen? Okay, sorry. Let's go back. Sorry, you didn't see the screen. Up. It's the first time I use webinar links instead of Teams links instead of, okay. So, can you see it now? No, still not. Yeah, okay, now it's great. So, yeah, so it's like this picture. You get into effortless work. And what is effortless work? Effortless work is when you feel able to cope, and a feeling able to cope is, of course, linked to your skills, but also your mindset and your energy level. So how you feel. And the other way is challenges. If you have too many challenges and you don't feel able to cope, you get in the anxiety zone. On the other hand, some people can think, oh, I'm tired of this job. It's way too demanding. Now I'm going to do something where it's really easy. You can get into boredom, which is not great neither. So you get into effortless work or this flow when you better feel able to cope, when you start changing who you are by changing the habits that I talked about. And so what are these principles? And I call them the slow leadership principles for the conscious leader. So if you want to have a big impact with effortless work in fast times, you first need to focus. But to focus, you need to know what you want. What is your intention? To be intentional. And then to free yourself from your conditioning and actually be able to say no, you have to increase your energy. And that will help you also be more creative, learn new skills, go out of your comfort zone. But in order to notice what is happening, you have to be aware. So learn this self-awareness. What is happening inside of me that makes me continue my conditioning? And if you're aware of it, you can change it. And then, of course, you have to regularly slow down and pause. So these are the leadership principles, the slow times habits that you should adopt. Instead of delivering everything, you learn to focus and say no. Instead of being action-oriented, you are intentional first and then action-oriented. Instead of managing your time, you manage your energy and your fears first and then your time. Instead of being ego-driven and rational and strong and showing that you know things, that you're right, you learn to be aware of your mindset and your conditioning. So do you think that effortless work means doing what you want or rather doing what comes up on your journey? Well, I think it's both. Sometimes it's about what comes up in your journey, but while being intentional. So maybe what comes up in your journey is not going to lead to what you want, and then you say no to it. So it's really about having this balance between facing enough challenges, but having the mindset, the energy, and the skills to face them. That's for me effortless work. Yeah, that was a question from the chat. And then instead of working hard, you learn to regularly pause and slow down. All right. And so, in fact, what is happening when you start changing your habits, you start changing who you are. Because we live in a society where we know a lot, we own a lot, we do a lot, but we have sometimes forgotten that we are human beings and not human doings. And so by changing these habits, you will start shifting who you are at the core. And so your conditioning, you will start to shift your identity. Your identity will not be as much linked to the things that worked in slow times, the conditionings that you've had from a very young age. And when you start changing who you are, you start getting into this effortless work, and that's when you have big, consistent impact. So knowing isn't enough anymore. It's about changing who you are in these uncertain, fast digital times. But an unconscious leader has the habits of slow times and is not aware of these habits. And so the work is hard and the results are small or inconsistent. And so when I did that, when I learned as a managing director to pause and slow down, that's when I started changing my habits and the habits that I just talked about. By changing my habits, I started to be in this effortless work. My impact started to increase, but also my work-life balance and my meaning. Because of course, if you're more intentional, you start to have things that are more in line to be in line with your values. And I see here, Fabienne, shall we first know who we are to successfully change our habits? It's linked, of course. Research has shown that if you change your identity, it will be easier to change your habits. And when you change your habits, your identity changes. So for instance, if you want to change your diet and to lose weight, but you see yourself as a fat person, it will be very hard for you to change your habits. If you start seeing yourself as a fit person, you will start implementing the habits of a fit person in a more easy way. So it's really changing at the level of identity. So then I changed my habits. That's when my leadership team started to change. That's when the whole organization and culture shifted, because the culture of an organization is the sum of the habits within that organization. That's when we could finally implement the new business techniques like working agile in cross-functional teams, increase empowerment. when we became performant and agile, and when we reached great results. And when I'm talking about great results, I'm talking about double-digit growth, 0 burnouts, and 50% less absenteeism. And so when you start changing in that level, and it's a deep level, I'm aware of it, you win, the people win, your organization wins, and our planet wins, because we are more aligned with what we deeply care about, and we're less ego-driven. And so, like I said, the suffering you might be feeling, and I hope you're not blocking it, because blocking it will make it worse, but allow it to feel it, because it will help you transform. Now I'm going to go rapidly through the 3 barriers that will prevent you from applying these principles. And the first one, I think I talked about it already, is I can't slow down because I have too much work to do. Well, of course, it's not that. Research shows that it's because you can't slow down that you have too much work to do. So if you think, I don't have time to change my habits, I don't have time to take breaks, well, the hard work and the running will only continue. And so here is a testimonial of somebody that started playing with slowing down and doing less. She started by not answering her emails immediately. She took more breaks, went home earlier, started to say no more. And she said, pretty much everything you said would happen, happened to me. So I started to feel better and my impact increased. I was more creative. I was more empathic, more focused. So it really, really works. So I would say, give it a try. And also, it's about transforming yourself and adopting the new habits of fast times. It's about reprogramming yourself. That is why you have to slow down. You reprogram yourself because you are not programmed and conditioned for the fast times. Yeah, and I see that. Can you repeat from knowledge to? I don't know what you mean by that. Yeah, it's about not transforming what you know, it's transforming who you are. So at the level of being. Okay, and then let me just show you, if you think that by running faster or by being more productive and working a little bit more, you will get there, I want to show you also this graph. And this graph shows what your productivity and effort means in function of your impact. And so of course, when you get more productive, your impact increases until it reaches a peak performance. But then at some point, it starts decreasing. So you might think that by becoming more productive, you will finally have the balance that you want, or by running faster, but you won't. And there is a fact, research, and the term for this, it's the law of diminished returns. And for me, we have reached our peak performance, most of us, and we are now, with our bad habits, continuing to try and be more productive, and it doesn't work anymore. And so is it about slowing down all the time? No. And look at this road. You accelerate when the road is clear and the car is in optimal condition. And then you slow down when the road is foggy or curvy, or when the car needs fuel or maintenance. And what I see is that most people do exactly the contrary. They accelerate when they face a problem, when they are stressed, when they are not in optimal condition. And when things go right, that's when they think, okay, now I slow down. You have to reprogram yourself to do exactly the opposite. So secondly, I don't believe that it can work for me. Well, for this, it's again the contrary. It won't work because you don't believe. So here again, the conditioning, but also the conditionings are creating some beliefs in us. And often the beliefs make us attract or behave a certain way. So if you don't believe that it works, it won't work because you won't even try it. So I know it's very ironic, but that's why managing your mindset, and within your mindset, it's also your beliefs, is crucial if you want it to work. And yeah, we don't have time for that video, sorry. The last thing that I often hear is it won't work in my organization with my directors because they should change first. So why bother? And here again, I wanted to share a little story about it's the same as imagine a guy goes to a doctor and he says, I'm not healthy, I'm feeling sick. He starts describing his symptoms. The doctor listens to him and she understands what the problem is. And then she says, okay, here is the prescription. Give these meds to your neighbor. Of course, that doesn't work. And it's the same for you. If you expect others to change, your boss, your organization, for it to work, it won't happen. It's like giving your power away. The best way to transform others is to transform yourself first. And the more you are to transform yourself, the bigger the cultural shift will be. So, best way to change others is to change yourself. So let's go to the summary of what I've talked about today. So the times have changed. We now live in very fast times that makes it impossible to deliver all the workload that you have. Then you have been conditioned to feel worthless if you don't deliver everything, if you pause, if you're not in control, if you make mistakes. Well, these are exactly what you need to do to be successful in these fast times. And so because of that, a lot of you work faster or work harder or run faster. So the answer is to change your habits, regularly slow down and pause, manage your mindset, change your energy, know what you want, and then focus and say no. That will be the way to effortless work. But that requires reprogramming yourself and going deep yourself. And when you do that, you will win and your impact will increase along with your balance. Your organization will win and our planet will win. And so it really worked. It works for me, but it worked for a lot of people that I've trained and that I've helped reprogram. Because of course, this is only a 1-hour webinar, so I could only show you the why and the what. But the how takes a little bit more time to help you transform. So these are a couple of testimonials of the fact that it really changes you at a deep level. So it helps you feel more confident, find your motivation back. It changes not only your work, but also your life. And you have more impact while using less energy. This is how you can transform. So you have to reprogram yourself, recondition yourself, and it will take time to do that, but there is a way to accelerate that. And so that's what we offer. So I'm gonna just talk just 2 minutes, if you allow me, about what we offer. So at Solvay Brussels School, that's exactly the program that we offer, Leading Authentically in Digital Times, is about transforming your habits in fast times. We have a new session starting May 22nd, but if you want to do it in company, you can do it when you want, because we, of course, offer this in company. Because when you change collectively, it's way easier and you have this culture that starts shifting, and that's when you become more agile and more performant as an organization while the people feel better in it. So I also give workshops and keynotes if you're interested. And what's the difference with other programs is that we combine real challenges with a new way of leading that brings that impact. It's also a blended course with online micro content, because transforming is about changing your habits, and you need to change your habits by practicing things daily. That's why micro content helps, especially if you're very busy. It's also designed to transform the identity, not just your actions and results, because once you shift in your identity, you put better actions in place and get better results. And so that's why it's compatible with most training programs that focus more on actions. Here we focus on your core identity, how to reprogram yourself. So I had a question here for somebody. Would you say there is a correlation between how long and good you slow down and how much more energy you can gain back? And so I'm going to answer yes, of course, but it will be, again, the same curve as the productivity curve. Because at some point, if you pause and slow down too much, well, then your results won't get there anymore. There is a balance there as well. And also the quality of your pauses is really, really important. Research shows that if you pause away from the computer, it will be way more efficient than if you pause behind your computer screen while eating and watching YouTube videos or whatever. It's not as productive, the pause. Still a question here. Do you think it would be difficult to incorporate these changes if the dynamic of a corporation is so rooted in the fast habits? So, Sarah, I'm not going to lie to you. It will be more difficult when everyone is still working the traditional and older way to change yourself. But in my experience, the people who have done that have managed to find their motivation back and better ways to deal with the situation they're in. Because there again, and then when you start transforming, it can inspire others to transform. So for instance, in an organization it was Nestle, I had one person who enrolled into the program and it really shifted something for her. So she convinced a group of persons to join it as well. And now Nestle has made it part of their yearly program for all the new people to really start shifting their habits and shifting who they are. So you can bring a lot of change for yourself, but it can help then your colleagues and your organization change as well. So I hope I've answered your question. Thank you very much, and we see you. Have a great day and slow down. Don't forget to slow down.